Listen only mode.
Okay, welcome everyone. I've got delegates flooding into the room as we speak, into our virtual seminar. And everyone's online, and that's great because I've managed to negotiate some free Wi-Fi space with the rest of my family so that we have a better connection than we did yesterday when we tested it. And thank you all for joining us. I think we're up to 69, so it's a good number to start with, really. In terms of this session, it's Decorative Surfaces. It's the final frontier for Inkjet. This session actually was meant to have been run in a live fashion at the TCM event. So what we're doing here is obviously recreating what we should have done, what would have happened a couple of weeks ago, with a notable addition, which is Mark Hanley. So thank you for joining us, Mark. The aim of this session at TCM is to provide a kind of real life discussion around introducing Inkjet into what is a traditional manufacturing sector. And we've got a really good panel here from Thorsten at Tarkett, Carsten at Hymmen, Klaas at Industrial Inkjet Consultants, who's also been with MS and Tarkett in his time now, a consultant, so he has a nice independent position within the entire mix. Richard Darling has joined us as well, which is brilliant, from Ricoh Europe. This event's powered by Ricoh and Hymmen. And also, you'll notice on the slide, Material Technique Mobile have helped us promote it. He's been kind and as a sort of leading mag to help us promote this session. What I'm going to just quickly, if you could bear with us a sec, get into the presentation. In Future, we're an independent strategic communications and marketing consultancy. Our kind of we created our branding or updated our branding earlier this year, and one of the kind of our objectives to help people find clarity and direction in the turbulent world, which of course seems very apt right now. I've kind of introduced the panel, but this is a really good panel of stuff. So we've got an hour, but I think we might extend beyond that, and you know, if we can cover a lot of ground and additionally talk a little bit about COVID-19, because we can't ignore the fact that we're all in lockdown at the moment. I think what we've seen and listening to a session earlier today is we're in this kind of crisis and shock phase right now, and I think some of the behaviour we've seen in some of the shops with mass buying of very basic products and so on, we've seen a sort of I guess a descent, some sectors of the population descending down most of the needs, really. Going forward, I think this is a great time to look at strategy for 2021, and I guess what I wanted to do today was really sort of start this conversation off with the panel really about how they view what's happening with the crisis at the moment, the lockdown, how it affects and everything. Yeah. So Mark.
Yes. Well, I think you know, this is from a pure economic and sales of your product perspective, it's another 2008, 2009. I mean, things are, people in trying to sell in our business, large items of capital equipment are going to be without sales for months. And it's catastrophic financially, obviously. And I don't think either at this point, any of us know when we come out of this. I mean, we've all got what we want to happen, but we're still, relatively speaking, at the beginning of this. So we do not know what the economic consequences are of this kind of external shock. And you were discussing earlier, Marcus, you know, is it a quick, sharp return? Does it stay down for a long time? I don't know. I don't want to be pessimistic or optimistic. I really want to be careful about that. I literally don't know. So I wish I could give better guidance than that. Although we have found in talking to our customers, they are very hungry to discuss this and listen to anybody's ideas on what it could be. So you can model it different ways. And the only thing I can say about our industry in digital production print is that it has a small cushion. Some of the bigger companies do anyway, because they have this legacy, very profitable revenue for consumables from markets they've already established. So our industry, peculiarly enough, is better placed, say, than, I don't know, an airline or a cruise company. So we'll definitely come through this, and the things which drive what we're talking about today in decorative print will definitely continue. It's just a case of when.
Thank you. Do you see, or anyone on the panel, perhaps Thorsten, do you see some of the attributes of digital printing in terms of redistribution of manufacturing, localized markets? Do you think that we might see a little bit of an acceleration for some of the values that digital can bring to, or digital printing can bring to manufacturing and to matching consumer need? Do you see a change or an acceleration potentially? How do you see things, Thorsten?
I don't see a change or acceleration at the moment, but I can see definitely what we can learn from this situation, because where we come from is that we were so dependent on Chinese production, and I think that digital inkjet printing has the possibility to provide a more local sourcing of products, a quicker sourcing, better reacting on trends, better reacting on customers' requests. So what we should learn is to have a more, let's say, spreaded production all over Europe, have a more versatile production made in Europe. And I think it's the same applies, of course, for other continents like US or even Asia, but everything is already there. But digital inkjet, if we do this in the right way, if we do the manufacturing setup in the right way, it can have a huge impact on the future business. And I think we learn from this crisis and we do the right steps.
Richard, because you've just joined us there, and what's your view of things at the moment? And how's, obviously we're in crisis mode, nobody knows, we're simulating information and so on and so forth, but some of the values that the inkjet can provide, but also as a digital process, without being opportunistic about it, it may become it may become a more positive place. When things get more positive, will digital start to become more appealing than perhaps is now to some traditional markets?
Well, I think it's interesting listening to what Mark said, that we don't know the end. We don't know about this kind of, nobody planned for it. And I think there will be a similar to 2009 type of crisis. At that time, there was a financial crisis, which meant that some of the things that people would have done, they couldn't do because there was no credit availability. That forced at that time industries like ceramics to change, because they had tremendous amounts of cash tied up in finished product inventory that was on a push system. I think when you get this type of crisis, it changes all of the economic models for the microeconomic models for businesses. So that we may find at the end some industries forced to change.
Right. Yeah.
I think I've got an echo on the line there.
That's okay. That's okay. So yeah, well, you said there that 2009. I guess the key difference is what Mark Ritson called an exogenous recession is going to ensue, and that is because it's become from outside. It's not even something we can't even blame bankers for this.
We can. I think we certainly can.
Klaas, your position, because obviously you're dialing in from North Germany, but your business is based in Switzerland, so it's a difficult time generally. Of course it is. It's a sad time too, because it's some of the stories we're hearing are obviously quite distressing. But from a business perspective, with your independence within your business and your market, how do you see this panning out? What's happening at the moment in your world?
It's getting more and more difficult. Of course, cash is not available or it's not that readily spent anymore. That means it's getting a bit more difficulty to do consultancy, but we are lucky to have one long-term contracts, which are already have started before. So we will get over the crisis, I think. And since we are only 2 people at the moment, so we can minimize our expenses and by that live a little bit longer from a cushion. I'm seeing as well the situation of Italian manufacturer builders like NS Printing, which is pretty healthy. And living like Mark and Richard said, they're living a little bit on the spare part business now. Not too much new sales, but they have a quite good installed base. Oh no, I'm getting an echo as well. But it's okay. For the moment, it's okay. And honestly, we have been in Germany. We're in 2 or 3 weeks now in lockdown mode, so it's not that long actually. The question is going to be how are we getting out of it? So how long is it going to stay like this, and how are we getting out of this? This is going to make the whole story of if it's going to be a real big crisis or if it's going to be a smaller crisis. That's what we are waiting all for at the moment, and to see what is going to happen in the next few weeks, or the next 2 weeks actually.
Yeah, critical time. And Carsten, obviously you're Bielefeld?
Correct.
Not far from Hanover. What do you think? How's things with Hymmen and generally?
Yeah, I think as Klaas said, it's just 2 weeks lockdown now, and we need to see how long does it take and how we get out of that situation, which is really not clear in the moment. From the Hymmen point of view, we are still in production. We are producing. We're building our machines. But yeah, let's see what sales is. At the moment, I think every stakeholder is more involved in getting everything running than investing into new projects in the moment.
Yeah, exactly. So it does give us some time to sort of think and look ahead, but equally we need to wait to see what this new landscape means and how we can develop a new strategy. But we have time for that. So that is sort of the last point. Reboot and relaunch is one of the themes we think going forward, is that as an industry, as an economy, that is something what businesses will need to do, is to reboot. Literally, where are we? How, thinking ahead, think about strategy as well as tactics, and then when the time is right, to relaunch against that, what will need to be a new strategy. So I want us to move off this now, because as much as it is an important issue, I want us to talk also about the fact that on a positive note, it's, I guess, the economy has, but for any new technology to enter a new market, obviously it does need to move across what Moore has defined as a chasm. So if you recall back in 2014 when we launched the Imprint show, that we had a huge diversity of different applications that were appearing to hopefully at any point, any moment soon, tip into sort of significant markets. Perhaps we were a little bit misled by what had happened with the ceramics industry. Hit very quickly and almost entirely in a short space of time. As Moore says, what happens is you get this early adopter phase where these people make up a small percentage of the industry. They're quite of any community. They're quite tolerant of imperfection. They want that kind of radical discontinuity and so on, but they don't really add up to the mainstream. What needs to ensue is a kind of leaping across that chasm. And as you leap across, you've got to kind of put footholds into new markets that are economically proven. The people in the early majority tend to be quite different to the early adopters. Early majority people need to see evidence of success and actual economic evidence and economic modeling that the new product is not only able to work at a technical level, but that delivers a clear economic argument for adoption. And I think, and as we move from the crossing chasm into the inside the tornado book that Moore says, actually you reach this point of a bowling alley with very early majority where that market starts to see the value, they start to see other people using the technology and benefiting from it. And that is something that Inkjet's found hard, hasn't it? Because of NDAs and understandable kind of keeping of information away because of competitive reasons and so on. But I actually think we're starting to see this kind of chasm being crossed now. Mark, I want to kind of introduce you at this point because IT Strategies have a fantastic if you'd like. Take the step.
All right. Thanks, Marcus. For those of you who don't know us, we've been around for 28 years and we're a vendor consultant entirely focused on industrial production digital print markets. And so just as a general introduction to and give you a large 50,000 foot overview of the size of what we're talking about here, we've been tracking this for 28 years really, and we're confident we have good conservative numbers. And on the left on our bar chart there, you can see that if we take all the revenues that the vendors of systems and components get for products and systems which go into production digital print outside of the office and consumer markets, the total here in the growth markets is about 13.6 billion, which is a significant number. And interestingly enough, the bottom part in blue, which is the commercial print or document print, is not the biggest part. No, that's usually what people talk about. The part in the middle in red is labels and packaging, which most of that is labels, and packaging is really embryonic. The really big markets are what we call industrial. Now, then we've split that out on the right. Now, the biggest part of industrial is wide format graphics. That's how we define it. It's not really a decorative market. We know that. Although, interestingly enough, I've got a star with the dotted edges around it, indicating that, oddly enough, decorative print or aesthetic values in print are beginning to play a role in the commercial use of graphics in selling brands and products. Anyway, that's just an interesting point. If we look at pure decorative markets, you could include in the large segment sort of northwest of this circle, which is mauve colored, you could include the ceramic tiles. That is technically for us a decorative market, but as Marcus said earlier, it's a complete outlier. It's one that went totally digital, and the rules that market runs by are totally different than for other markets. You could also include that other very big share of the pie in red there, which is textiles. Textiles is technically also a decorative market, but I know that today we're really talking about all these markets that I've marked with green stars, and these are markets for architectural surfaces, flooring, wood, printing of glass. We would also include 3D marking. That's not the same as 3D printing. 3D marking is where you take a manufactured product and you print on it in its manufactured or semi-manufactured state. So for example, it started off in printing, I haven't got an example here, but in printing cases for iPhones. People think that's sort of not a mainstream product. Well, that's completely wrong. It's that's part of the market for promotional goods, and the promotional goods markets in the United States alone for printed promotional goods, and they all are printed because they all have to identify with the user, are worth around about $35 billion. So we include that as well. But if we take, if we use the big definition, including textiles and ceramics, then you could say of the industrial digital print markets, about 40% are decorative. If you take out ceramics and textiles and get to the real true decorative markets as originally defined, then that's about 14% in total of the market. So if we look at the total value of all the decorative markets, we tend to talk about vendor values, but I've also put in here a retail print value. So this is what users would spend. So if you include textiles, you include ceramics, and you include all the pure, true decorative markets, then the total value that users spend on these digitally printed products is at least $24 billion. which gives you some idea of how important this is. Now, from an industrial perspective, these markets have been around actually for quite a long time, and they're quite slow to develop. And they only grow at about 6 to 8%. Personally, I think in many ways, given the incredible complexity of the markets and the technical problems, a growth rate of 6 to 8% is appropriate to the market environment. But of course, the vendors are never happy with that because their own office markets are declining faster than that, out of a much bigger base. So there's a sort of a tension there where the vendors want to get into it, but they're saying, but it's not big enough. But of course, it will be one day. So move on to the next slide, please, Marcus, quickly.
Yeah, that's it.
Okay, so I just want to raise one topic that came up again and again when we rehearsed yesterday, which I think is very critical, and it's the question of scale. Should digital be large or small scale? Actually, historically, most successful production digital print markets have all been small scale, lower volumes, high value. I think that's the dominant business model for industrial production, for digital production print in general, and particularly industrial print. So that's my opinion based on what's historically happened. However, in the decorative markets, we have, for example, seen attempts to go right up into the production sector and in some way compete in specification with what's already done in gravure or flexo. So for example, we have KBA has for years now been working with some of the larger gravure printers in architectural surface markets to generate very large scale inkjet machines. Companies like Interprint in Germany, Tetra Pak now in the US, these are very highly scaled projects, but our observation of it is they've been very slow to develop, very difficult technically, and do not have up to date an important place in the market despite many years of development. On the other hand, and by the way, I could also point outside of pure decorative, look at Heidelberg exceeding folding carton. There's another company that should know about production that went right up to the top and tried to match the performance in some areas of what they can do in offset. They couldn't sell more than a handful in a year. So the question of, because of the cost of these machines, because of the difficulty in developing them, the way they change so quickly, because of the high cost of print, the question is, should you go in a centralized way like that? My observation is that seems like the difficult way. When I look at two of our participant companies today, like Hymmen and Tarkett, who, the way I see it, have a different model, and they've enabled digital production print to be available further down line, much more flexibly. That seems to me, and I'm not blowing the trumpet for those two companies, so they've done a great job, but there's others. That seems to me to be a much more workable model and better for business because it allows fast response, high values, and allows capital accumulation in the early years of what is a very long-term development path for digital print technology. By the way, in looking at all those decorative markets we looked at before, you have solvent print, you have UV print, you have attempts to use aqueous inkjet technology. So that's some indication to you of the complexity and the early stage we are at in real technical development. So I'm put my cards on the table and say I'm very much a supporter of downline lower scale at this point. Perhaps that'll change in future. So I just throw that out as maybe a subject for debate since it came up a lot yesterday, and I'll stop there.
Thank you, Mark. That's a superb link into introducing Thorsten from Tarkett, who can explain a bit about the developments there, because actually you're right, I've had my eye off what's been happening in the market and then coming back into it. Tarkett, obviously Hymmen and Ricoh and so seem to be making significant strides forward with a different strategy. Thorsten.
Yeah, true. And I also heard what Mark was saying, to say, okay, perhaps you need to not to put all your money on one horse. And this is exactly what we did at Tarkett. So the development of a huge single pass printer, we also started with some scanning machines in US, and they are also working quite fine, but in a different way. what we can say today after, correct me if I'm wrong, Klaas, because you know it even better than me. I think after 7 years of from the start of the development in the single pass machine, is it 7? So we can say today that the technology that we are using, which is single pass and direct printing on film with water-based inks, is for us mature and working. So in the 3-4 slides later, you will see our first collection, which is completely digital printed and available from stock, as we had some other collections where we already produced more or less made to order. But we have seen, and this we have gotten as a feedback from our customers, that the people really see the difference now. They start to see the difference between a rotogravure printed and a digital printed product. And this even on designs where people from outside said it's just not possible to print this in digital. So what we have learned is that you have to start in the development and not start from something which is existing. And I always like this sentence, that we should use the digital printing possibilities, especially in the design development, instead copying the limitations from rotogravure. And this is exactly what the big decor printers tried to do. So they had this fantastic idea to say, okay, this is an item which is not running very well, but we still need to maintain it. So we are not selling 5 tons of every paper, but the customer still needs that even when he is selling like 500 kilograms. So, and they would like to substitute these huge high running items with small batches made by digital. And then they finally found out, and we are at the same point to say, okay, you can't just simply substitute a rotogravure design into a digital design, because the resolution is not right, something went wrong, color matching is extremely difficult, because you are coming from a separation which is done by pre-mixed colors, and then you need a separation in CMYK if you need a separation. So but we have done a different way at Tarkett. So all our digital printed decors are also digital developments. And this is the important point. And as I'm talking about it, and this is also a statement where I truly believe is that we are now arriving at a point where we are not longer talking about feasibility, what is working, what's not working, will it be successful on the market or not. Now we have to find the answers how to earn money. And of course, we try to make as much as possible in digital for the future, but also we have to find good solutions to offer customized product for our clients, which is done today by us. So what I would like to bring to you and to this into my colleagues is we are looking forward to the digital technology and to the products that we can achieve.
And thank you, Thorsten. It sounds like it's been driven by design. So people are really kind of getting this kind of possibilities that the design can provide. Is that right? Is that what you're seeing?
I didn't get it in full because there was this echo again on the line. What I understood is that so using the possibilities from the design to print is important, and here I said yes, of course it is.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for that. And so Tarkett are moving things forward at quite a pace there. So in terms of your production, Thorsten, how much of it is digital now and compared to analog?
So for LVT, I can tell you that today we already had a 10% share in digital, and this is tremendously growing from month to month. We are focusing for the moment on the LVT products because here we also see a kind of USP for us, because most of the people are thinking in rolls when they think about digital printing. which for me is not our business today, of course. Everybody is looking into it, but today LVT is our main driver, and it's also the growth driver on the whole market. So we try to find solutions here. 10% is what we have today, but of course we will increase this tremendously because we just see the opportunity here also to do bigger design, to do nicer design, and to be more flexible in customization.
Okay.
Maybe
quick note. Mark, I think you need to mute your microphone. Apparently.
Okay.
This is a big echo. It's coming from across the Atlantic. Ping-ponging. So thanks for that, Thorsten. That's really, and these designs do look superb. They're offering new possibilities, and you can see why designers are kind of going, wow. You know, one of the things I've spoken to designers at various shows and talked to them about digital print, the ones that are in actual fact starting to use it, and their face lights up because they have this liberating sense to which they can truly express their ideas without the fear of the stock being kind of either their collection not being popular and the stock being wasted, or the economic burden of their design being kind of, you know, on the one hand unpopular, and therefore their responsibility has been felt. So it kind of liberates them from that, and I think that is a key point for designers. Thanks for that, Thorsten. I'm going to pass across now to Carsten. I wonder if you could take up some of those themes, Carsten, because I know you've been involved. I think we first met when you Hymmen took part in Imprint at the first ever Imprint, and you had the Jupiter, and you were working with I think Zara at that point, and I know Richard's kind of got a lot of experience in terms of this session, this kind of area. Picking up on some of the things Thorsten's made, and also Mark mentioned this decentralization and also the economic case for adoption. Is that starting to become quite a compelling thing for your customers?
Yeah, I think economic is the most part in that everything has to be economic when you spend that big number of money for such a project. But one important thing before I forget it is to comment Thorsten and ask Thorsten a question. So how important is in your eyes the replication of analog designs and metamerism? We are talking since the very first beginnings of Hymmen digital involvement. We are speaking about metamerism and how easy it is to replicate digital printing and analog printing. But as I heard from your presentation, and then you told that many times, you have a digital design made, and this is not to be transferred to analog anymore. Is that right?
That's correct, Carsten. So we do exclusive digital designs only for digital, and we don't intend to mix technologies.
Yeah, and this is one major point that when you start printing digital larger volumes, you create designs for digital. You're using the benefit of digital printing, and then you don't want to stop printing digital anymore. And for this, it's very important that it is economic at all. I don't know how close all guests are with the decor market and printing laminate in the melamine world. Typically, it is digital printed paper, which is then impregnated and then pressed under heat and pressure with on wooden boards. When you go to the next slide, Marcus, then we would see a very simple example of a laminate flooring. In this case, the number the number 2 is a digital printed paper, and this is not produced in the same rooms or in the same facilities as all the other things are produced. When we see on the next slide, we will see what's actually happening. So some printing locations are printing large numbers of paper all around the world. We have 5 major printing companies. They are printing analog the paper, and then they share it by lorries and trucks through Europe, in this case, to different sites where the companies use it for producing boards with the papers. This green locations, it's for sure need to use high volumes, and this is they are printing tons of paper, and they need maybe high volume printing machines. But when you move over the slides to the next slide, they cannot give the benefits of digital printing to the industry. There is still material stocking, there is roller storage, there's overproduction of material because they have to send it over. They have the deco change time in analog. In digital printing, everything is much faster in reaction. You have new design opportunities, and this can be given very good to the location sites. When you go to the next page, you would see that a typical digital printing machine could to overcome that issue can go to digital printing. Can you click through, please? Yeah. So the capacity of one production site is something in the area of 5 to 15 million square meters for a production site or for production machine. Depends on the size of the company, but on average is something in that area. The existing printing machines in the market are able to produce 94 million square meters, which are the big single pass printers, which is the yellow dot, with a very high invest and a very high output. And as you said, Marcus, in the beginning, there was multipass printing also. And there is multipass printing available in the market. Machines are not high in invest, but the capacity of such machines are far away from what a production site needs. And this goes over that we think we need machines which are exactly in the middle of in that capacity range, and that's why we have the Saturn line developed together with Ricoh, that we have the machine which feeds in exactly in that gap for one operation site. This is what we are when we are talking about decentralization. We want to move the digital printing or the printing at all to the location where the material is finished.
It's interesting that obviously we started talking about the crisis, but decentralization of manufacturing would actually be quite convenient right now, wouldn't it? Because if we're over reliant on different territories, the stuff isn't getting here. People aren't able to supply. So a decentralized model would probably be the most sensible in terms of supplying local demand and local kind of style and fashion, but equally just simply a fundamentally sensible economic model. Yeah,
that's correct. I think so.
Richard, would you like to build on that at all, Richard Darling?
Yeah, that's a really interesting thing. The crisis, of course, when we're dealing with laminate flooring and everything, there are more important Maslow's hierarchy. There are more important things for people to think about immediately, but then it does take a long time for supply chains to crank up to full output. And if we're in this situation, you can imagine that there's going to be a severe imbalance between supply and demand through a push system. So it's going to be a slow cranking up. If we had more self-sufficiency, where the designs were just digital files and there was no inventory in the system, no work in progress, and it was on a pull system, then it can be varied according to the actual demand much more flexibly. So you can only do that. You can't do that with a centralized facility. But that's not to say that the same experts, the same people who run the centralized facilities, couldn't actually change their models, carry on the same relationships, the same design portfolios if necessary, or if desirable, and they could actually run satellite operations in each of their customers' plants. That's pretty similar to what's happened in the document world, in the office print world.
Very good, Klaas, because your independent kind of position in the market, so and your background experience and so on with Tarkett and also with MS and so on, is that, what's your view of this kind of slightly different, well, strategically different approach to Inkjet and Decor?
Actually, it's not that different, because Inkjet Decor paper, that's what we were talking right now. So we were talking before about Inkjet for LVT with Thorsten, that what we developed in Tarkett at that time. And as Thorsten explained, we started as well with smaller multipass printers for locations that needed lower capacity, that were more aiming at customization. So you had machines that are definitely doing customization, low volumes, or maybe 250 to 500,000 square meters, or 250,000 to 500,000 square meter a year maybe. And then you had the single pass machine in Luxembourg. And the single pass machine, of course, is more expensive. It has a higher capacity, but it was still fitting quite okay in the region that was needed. The issue that we have from the past, or from the legacy, is that we have all these printing cylinders that are engraved. So we have all that equipment standing everywhere, and that is leading to decentralization to centralization. That means if you have all this equipment bought, this is why all the big printing mills for decorative paper, they have a huge investment on cylinders. So you want to utilize this investment. So the machines have to run fast, they have to produce tons. And that's where we're coming from. We had to centralize because of cylinders. Now we don't need cylinders anymore. So there is a potential for decentralization. So we can move around designs around the globe. But to get there, we need to get more consistent on color, for example, or on design consistency from one place to the other. The way we had to go through with Tarkett, and this is as well one of the reasons why we now have a lot of designs developed especially for digital, is to understand the strengths and the weaknesses as well of digital. Analog printing has strengths and weaknesses, and Inkjet has strengths and weaknesses. And we were doing more designs that were more fitting the strengths and avoiding the weaknesses. And this is leading to different designs, sometimes more appealing, longer repeat, more colors in Inkjet. And you can do those ones now basically all over the world. So you need to buy a printer, an Inkjet printer, or you need to be able to ship the design. You need to be able to print color consistent. And then you could do the same design in Asia and Africa and America and in Europe. And then you have one printer per location, for geographic location. You can avoid all the shipment, and you can print for your local markets. That's what you said before, Marcus. You said you have different markets, different needs, and right now you need, and it's getting smaller and smaller, the needs. So yes, we need delocalization. We need a printer that is at the location. Inkjet has definitely the tools to do that. One thing that Carsten mentioned, and is right, is the cost of a single pass printer. They are quite too high. There are different approaches right now to get there, but it has to be decided case by case. And that's what we do in our company. We try to help our customers to do the right decisions, to take the decision, what kind of printer is fitting their needs, what do they have to do, and how we can help them, and how Inkjet can help them.
Okay, So
can I throw something in here, Marcus? I keep hearing this very important word, design, and there's a whole infrastructure of people who get print products ready. I'll give you an example of what a huge problem this can be out of the corrugated world, where a couple of years ago, everybody in sight was going to put forward a production inkjet corrugated printing system. Well, at the moment, that market has run into a rut and it's not really getting forward. There are a lot of reasons for that. One reason was, however, it was a very conservative industry, and all the designers and all the infrastructure of people who even conceptualized what packaging is was a very big bureaucracy. And when you get to digital, the design's completely different. And I'm not just talking about the graphic design, I'm talking about your sense of what a package has to do and who it addresses. And in the corrugated world, that was almost impossible to get these designers to understand that actually with digital, you produce a different product for a different person doing a different thing. And so I think it's not all about print technology. It's about some of the entrenched practices, especially around design, which really do need to be moved by as many participants as can do it.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. That's a good point. So, Carsten,
Marcus, could I come in on that? There's just something in packaging as well. The whole way, the whole industry in some of these sectors is geared up to producing millions and more of the same thing, so that we all accept the same offering from the same brand or the same supplier. And what this really enables is a batch size of one. Ultimately, realistically, in flooring, it would be room size kits. Of any sort of room, whether it's for domestic or commercial or whatever, but it enables a completely different thing. But in packaging, that enables targeting of messaging, and it's the same concept, and the design is the same, but the design infrastructure of a brand is that they manage very few variations, and they manage them very closely. And in the future world that is enabled by this print technology, it'll be much more variety, managed much less closely. I don't know if anybody else agrees with that.
I just wanted to comment on what Mark said before. Yes, it is. You have to manage the design in the pre-press. This is one of the lessons that we had to learn at Tarkett the hard way. And I was happy Thorsten joined after some time, because it took us quite some time to convince everybody that we not only need to invest in a printer, we need to invest as well in people to make the designs and to be able to deliver designs to the printer. Because traditionally, everybody is buying a design. The majority of people is buying designs or buying engraved cylinders. If you do inkjet, you suddenly have to deliver the file to the printer, and you need to do it right for the machine. And that's, for a lot of companies, difficult to understand. They can just take a photo of a wood structure, to just take a picture and we print it. It's not that easy. There's some skill sets, and there's some software, and there's scanning, and there's a complete process that runs before the printer, which is often underestimated and undervalued as well by people.
Yeah, thank you, Klaas, for saying this. It's absolutely true. You need a skill set, and what we see is that the classical providers of files, which are mainly the engravers, are completely suffering for the situation. And also looking in-house at our people, they still have a problem to identify a digital file as an asset, right? They look at a printing cylinder and they say, okay, that has a value. It's steel, it's heavy metal, but they have to learn that today's printing file, where you have around 300 hours of work inside this file, is also a value. It's an asset. And this is something where they have to learn and have to rethink how we are doing business, for sure.
This is changing very fast in the last times. When I remember that 12 years ago when we started with digital printing, everyone was saying, how do you get files? You have the cylinder engravers, they wouldn't give you the files. How do you want to get digital files for wood design? You cannot make a picture of that only. It's true, you need skilled people and good trained employees, for that. But the independent design studios are growing and growing very fast, especially in the last year. So it's more than easy to get a 2 meter by 2 meter 80 wood design for 3,000 euros just a CMYK or RGB file. This is possible. This is it's still a question of following a trend, of finding the needs, meeting the spirit of everything. But it's becoming easier the last years, and I think there is already a larger number digital printed. As you said, it's 10% of your production, Thorsten, and with Hymmen machines, it's 90 million square meters digital printed per year, wood and stone designs. So it's possible, and it is something you have to take in account, but it's getting more easy and easier during the last years.
And this slide, Carsten, and building upon what we were saying earlier about the economic model and the economic reasons for adopting inkjet, so explain a bit about this. So what Saturn is and how you've developed it and what role it performs within production.
Yeah, the Saturn is built to print for the need, which is it's adapted to the needs of one production site. So why shouldn't a producer of wooden boards print more than he needs? Every machine is working most economic when it's printing to the volume which is designed for. And we designed a machine, the Saturn machine, which is printing with a speed of roughly 30 meters a minute, which is exactly filling that gap with needs for the customer. Not designed to print with a 150 meter speed, very high volume, not meeting. Richard has a good word for that. It's digital printing analog machine. It's a copy of analog printing machines. They try to meet the speed, they try to meet metamerism, behaving the same, printing on exactly the same papers. This is not needed. So when you reduce it to your needs, to the needs of the end customer, you get a machine which is lower in invest, for sure lower in volume, but still producing the volume you need. Yeah, and in the important thing, it's feeding or it's improving your process chain. When you move over to the next slide, it's my last slide at all. So one click more, you will see that is the way external printed paper is implemented in the process chain. So typically the paper is ordered from a Deco printer, and you have to buy at least 1 ton of paper. Typically 3 tons is an average, or it's a good number for a paper producer. But you need to buy at least 1 ton. Then you wait for that, and you get the goods received after time. You put it in stock, which is then the rolls in the middle. When your production planner says go for producing that boards, you go to an impregnation line and put it in the press. When you don't need the 1 ton, which you have to you've bought in, you have to put the rest in the stock again. Yeah. So everything is in that chain is it's time, delay, it's multiple sites involved. And when you go for digital printing yourself, you have only to have the white paper in storage. That's what you have to care about. And then you print exactly the volume you need and put it in the press. And that design is something no one wants, you never print it again. Yeah. And the other way around, when you have external printed paper and you go for that design, you still have that in stock and it's obsolete material by the end of the year. Yeah, we've spoken to many manufacturers and asked them, how many paper are you throwing away at the end of the year which is not used at all because your Thorsten is just laughing. And we heard numbers about, so some say it's 5%, but most of them say 10 to 15% is what they throw away at the end of the year, or maybe after 2 years in stock.
There's a reason why Tarkett left the laminate business, yes.
Okay. Yeah. So
well, that's
printing
that's a big thing. I mean, waste and efficiency and environment is an economic thing, but also it's good for the environment, right? The less product we waste, the better.
Yeah. But just when you see a big company like Tarkett every year, so we have to come back to Tarkett every time because Thorsten is sitting here. When they have a new design, a new collection, it's typically 25, 30 new designs involved per year. Is it right?
Yeah,
maybe more?
Yeah. With digital, it's getting more. It's getting more with digital.
But the traditional business is 20 designs, 30 designs, maybe something in that. So when you go for 20 designs, new designs, your designer create 20 designs, and you have to buy printed paper, 20 tons of that to see if that is a success or not.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And from this 20 tons. Yeah, 20 designs.
As I said, there was a reason why we left laminate business exactly of this point, because and we started just before we closed the plant. We started digital printing from one company who was able to do it. Yeah, but as you said, Carsten, there was always this 1 ton barrier. It was even when you are not sure if this design will be a hit or not.
But honestly, you can as well translate this to PVC, because the majority of suppliers are still buying printed film from China.
Yeah, it's roughly
talking about delivery times, talking about pre-laminated film. I remember the stock from Tarkett in North America. These are millions of euros or dollars of PVC film that is sometimes 5 or 10 years old. So you will never use that again. It's just kept in stock sometimes because you don't want to write it off. That's just problems and problems. So it's
or recycle it.
Yeah, you can recycle it, but you can only recycle a portion of it. So you have to pay it, you have to ship it from Asia, and if it's a disaster, if the design is just failing, you just have not 5 tons in PVC film, it's less, but still you have thousands of dollars that you just scrap away.
And it seems that it's a process of education, really, in terms of understanding the role that digital can play. Is that how much time, Richard, do you spend actually helping people just kind of make the right choices with digital? I've heard and seen in various markets, sometimes innovate, the inkjet community perhaps is guilty of innovating the wrong technology, maybe the wrong solution for the wrong problem. How much time do you devote to that? And your Ricoh strategy at the moment is very much about partnership, isn't it? And about developing in tandem with the industry, not in isolation.
I suppose there's a whole range of situations. So in some regards, then people actually buy our components and they assemble their own things. We'll put the effort into the ones that we think have, I think there was an allusion to backing the right horses. So you have to pick the ones that are obviously, that have the best chances of success. In partnerships, then you discuss it more thoroughly, as Hymmen and Ricoh have done at the beginning of Saturn. And we're completely aligned on where this fits into the market, the space that's there unfilled, and how this fills that space, and the total cost to the operator, the end customer, and the benefits that it delivers. Some of these equations are quite complex, but what we try to do is study that in detail, regardless of whether we're supplying components, print heads, and that's all, maybe software. or whether we're actually working in partnership as we are with Hymmen. So yeah, and all OEMs, some people they have as Carsten mentioned, they want to design a digital analog machine, and you see a lot of money spent on that. And Mark mentioned it. A digital analog machine it's got a very low probability for success, technically and commercially.
Explain it. It's probably self-explanatory, but by that you mean it's a solution that's just replaces the analog thing, but doesn't do what digital's good at, right? It doesn't.
You can take it all goes down to centralization. In high volume print, there's usually a centralized supply structure. Somebody is printing in high volume and printing as fast as they can to supply as many customers as they can, and they're radially distributing a printed product. So whether that's an offset press or a label press, or whether it's actually a decor printer through rotogravure, they're centrally producing something that they distribute to various other customers, many other customers. And the faster they print, the more money they make. So that's the name of specialist printing. That's how it is. In other environments, then printing has become non-specialist. It's more commodity. We print ourselves at our desks in our homes, in office print, document print, and before that would have been unthinkable. So in industry, it makes sense to actually print closer to the point of demand, balance it to the point of to the throughput need, and then the only thing you have to really mind is that the unit cost of what you produce, taking into account total cost, not just the ink and substrate pro rata compared to gravure, the total cost of the operation. And as long as you come out to be economically viable, then what's the reason why not? So I think that crossing that chasm is very important, as you mentioned at the top of the hour. Crossing that chasm depends on rational economic visibility of one way of doing things compared to another.
Yeah, and that rational economic. Do you sense we're in that space now? Whereas the economic reason for adoption is clearer, or becoming much clearer. I mean,
yeah, I think we're moving on from for years we've all been involved in digital print for years, and some from the critiques point of view, the potential users perspective, some as an observer of it, and some of us in the thick of it. And I think we can all remember times when digital print, inkjet printing for single pass decor printing was absolutely not ready. Too many issues, too many problems, unreliable, drop sizes too big, so on and so forth. I think we're past all of that. It does the job. There is inkjet printing, and I think if we can get past this blindness for the overheads that are involved in the current system, the wastage, scrap, obsolescence, lost opportunity in market through lack of variety, being constrained by a cumbersome centralized process. If we can get a visibility of all of that, I have no doubt that Saturn plus other systems that aim for that space will succeed in the decor industry.
And once
that comes from actually going to board producers and hearing their concerns, hearing what they're interested in, what they want, what they see as what they don't want, and looking at their costs. I can't see a way that if I were in their position, between 5 and 15 million square meters throughput, it's a no-brainer.
Yeah, so you're really confident that all of the components are there now to be deployed for digital to do the right job. Do you, for the whole panel, do you see a time where actually rotogravure becomes a specialist technology, and only for certain applications, and that actually digital dominates? Is that going to happen at any point soon, or at any point in the future, do you think?
Can I start on that, Marcus? Because I sounded like a bit of a digital fundamentalist there, and I'm absolutely not. I think rotogravure and the same in other industries for screen and flexo print, they have tremendous advantages. If you want to produce a lot of the same, they're much more efficient, much more cost efficient on a unit cost basis. So as long as you can get what they output to where they're needed, then they have tremendous advantages. And you have to recognize the advantages of each and not try and copy one with the other. I think that's a very important point, and I'll leave it to everybody else to say what they think.
Anybody else that got an opinion on the panel?
I can just confirm it. Just confirm what Richard said. It's going to be there. Analog printing is going to maintain. It's going to stay. It has a good reason to be there for exactly what Richard said. It's a high volume, quite low cost technology. We will get closer in cost-wise, I guess. I can see it from textile. Textile inkjet printing now is cheaper than analog printing. So ceramic tile is getting there as well. It's cheaper. So we will get closer with inkjet to analog printing, but still over a reasonable amount of time, I think analog printing for mass production, if you take away the design creation, engraving costs and all the parts, is going to be cheaper.
Yeah, I think it will go in parallel for a long time. It will go in for parallel. No one can say how fast is the growing of digital printing is. For standard production and nothing, not the real special things, because the analog world is very innovative and they are doing great jobs in for designs and also for textures and other things. But for the regular production, digital printing will come and go in parallel for a long time, I think, before it is maybe more digital printing than analog.
Do you see a possibility? Sorry, carry on, whoever that was.
Yeah, in my point of view, the speed is much slower than I expected in the beginning. Could also be that a good huge machine is a quite huge investment, and all the other machines are already purchased. The cylinders are stored, and a lot of other companies don't have a clue how to design a digital printing file and how to control it. So this might also be a reason, but I think when the scale of economy of digital printing is kicking in, we will see speed accelerating, that companies are shifting to digital printing. And I've seen the same development almost 30 years ago on in pre-press on offset printing, where this was like in a 3 years period changing the whole business.
Yeah, change the whole business. One of the questions I have, I'm not going to get to ask it. Go on, Mark. Okay.
I just want to say, we did a calculation recently in the graphic arts market, and we looked at the total remaining amount of output that industry generates. We divided that into the capacities of the fastest available digital print machines, and not all of these machines can do what graphic arts does either. Anyway, you come to a number. If you wanted to replace everything that's out there in analog with digital, you come to a number for acquisition of fast systems that exceeds the revenues of the industry. So that's acquisition cost. If you want to look at print costs, that's why analog exists. It's not just a bit less expensive, it's less expensive by orders of magnitude, and that's where the market is right now. So it's quite a slow, gradual path. We'll all get there one day, but it's not going to be the next 5 years.
No. Do you see just? Well, I mean, we saw this with other markets, didn't we? That new businesses entered. So the digital technology enabled companies to set up with the digital technology. Do you see that happening in this sector?
I don't. I think there are too many barriers for that to happen. It's part of a process rather than in other areas. It's just say for sign and graphics, it's maybe buy some media on a reel, print it, and then put a laminate protection on it. That's very easy. This is the decor industry. The wood decor industry is very, very different. So I would say it's the same operators of that whole process line, the same people who have the access to designs, the same people who have the access to markets and customers for the end product. That's going to stay the same, and I don't see small operators being able to get in with you know, like it did in sign and graphics.
I think, Richard, that is absolutely correct. But let me just say, I'm not quite certain as you. When I look in flexible packaging in the US and I look at the company called EPAC, they have 20 indigo, more than 20 indigo, 20,000s. And it's a perfect example of a parallel operation. It's tiny, tiny in its output compared to the flexible packaging industry. But it's definitely a separate, independent economic activity for which there's demand, on the other hand. So I don't think in terms of balance it's huge, but I do think the phenomenon exists.
I'd agree with you, Mark, on flexible packaging and maybe label as well, but on wood decor specifically, I think it'll stay with the same.
I think that's right. Wherever you have a heavy manufacturing content and an infrastructure of industry, yes, I agree with you.
Right.
Can I make a point?
Just one comment. There are companies, or there are people looking into investing which are completely new to flooring, or that have not too much to do with flooring, and they were looking into buying maybe an inkjet machine first-hand side. So they were not looking at analog printing immediately. They were looking, I will do a new investment, I will go decorative industries, and I will go inkjet. So I guess if there is not an existing technology, if there's not an existing investment, the chances are at least 50-50 that they go digital.
Yeah,
I agree with Klaas. I think there is a chance. Both Richard and Klaas are right. So there is one hand is that the process to create wood-based board or plastic LVT boards, floorings, the process is a large process chain, and where digital printing is only a small part in that. So, but when you are able to create new possibilities in digital printing, which is, for example, printing on LVT boards, it's not a common thing. Thorsten is doing that, but I think he's the only one who's doing that in a good way. But when that is when this way opens digital printing to print on boards, then maybe some others jump into that technology and be involved in that.
Yeah, I agree, Carsten. There are some things which are super complicated to do, and you said printing on LVT boards. This might perhaps the next one. And if you look at this market, if you look at the market of a rigid, clickable flooring, this is huge, because this is replacing laminate. As we know, laminate has a huge downside, which is recycling. So it said that in the next years there will be a law from European Union that said everything what you have to produce have to be taken back. So to all the laminate producers, have fun with taking back the laminate, because this is not so easy to recycle. So there might be some new markets growing very quickly on a product which has to be fully recyclable, and there is digital printing just the perfect solution for this. And then we will see a tremendous growth. But also one thing to add here, when we look or when we talk about economy, we also have to think about the cost of ownership, because a digital file is reprintable every time, as also rotogravure cylinders are worn out. So you have to reproduce them again and again and again, and they are not getting better by reproducing them. So when you look at the cost of ownership of a design for 10 years, then the calculation might end up a little bit different than it is today.
Okay,
I think that's an interesting point. If I could just add to that, I think we were talking about the considering designs as an asset, and if you have a piece of metal with that design on it, then that's a clear asset. But at what point do cylinders become a liability? And the second part to the question is comparing just the ink cost, and people say by order of magnitude different. When you compare these costs of tooling, maintenance, storage of that tooling, changeover time for that tooling, and the run lengths to be able to correct color, to get it reproducible to last batches and so on, there are significant wastages in those and costs in those processes. So, and also that's profit and loss and balance sheet losses. If you have to write off a big magazine of cylinders, that's a massive write-off. So there are barriers to rapid change in this field, and there are also some psychological barriers to how the costs are compared.
Interesting. Can I just, before kind of moving towards concluding, water-based ink, how important is that as an integral component? Is that something the market has kind of asked for? Because am I right in thinking that is something that the Saturn has been developed with, water-based? Is that right?
That's true.
Okay.
So the water-based ink is one of the it's requested since ever, I think. When we started 12 years ago for digital printing, we came from analog printing direct to board, which was water-based gravure printing machines. The water-based printing is much better supporting the post process of the whole melamine world. It is maybe UV ink is easy to jet, but in simple words, UV ink is easy to jet and to print, but not easy to press with melamine. Water-based ink is the other way around.
Okay, so it's an important development really in terms of the. Has anybody else got any comments to make before I kind of conclude really?
On water-based.
Sorry.
On water-based ink, you can conclude the same story for LVT or for PVC. It's easier to handle a water-based ink in the post-processing. It's a little bit more difficult to print it on the PVC. Yeah. But finally, as well, water-based inks can be cheaper long-term. Because the raw materials that go into water-based inks are just cheaper than the raw materials that go into UV inks in long-term perspective.
So it's technically better to have a water-based ink, or is it because people think water-based ink's better environmentally, or a bit of both?
No, water-based ink is easier for a lamination process, for example, in PVC lamination. Whenever you need a PVC wear layer adhering to the surface, the water-based ink is easier. It's more difficult to print, as Carsten said. It's a little bit more difficult to jet. I don't say UV is easy to jet. There are some really difficult UV inks as well to jet, but UV inks have a tendency to create less problems in the printer, but they create more problems afterwards when you have to put something on the top, or when you have to restrict some reach regulations or other things. So there are some problems with UV inks that lead to a tendency to go more water-based. And the packaging world is coming into inkjet, so all the packaging guys want water-based. So there's a huge move to water-based as well from that area.
Yeah, sure.
Thorsten, can I ask a question of you? Because, you know, years ago in wide format, we used to have hard solvent wide format printers. Of course, they still have them in China, and they print LVTs in China, don't they, with solvent? I mean, do they? And would that be okay in an industrial environment, given that solvent inks cost nothing?
Yeah, China is mainly producing with solvent inks in the classical printing way, but not on digital, from my knowledge.
Yeah. Well, listen, guys, I think we need to sort of wrap this up, really. I kind of, before I move to a sort of conclusion, really, I wanted to flag this up, that next week available is a special report written by Richard Darling of Ricoh Europe, Decor for Inkjet, really in-depth, very well written and well pulled together report with Carsten and other sort of factors and analysis and so on over the past couple of years, actually. So, and it focusing on the economics as well as the technical aspects. So the economic reasons for adopting Inkjet is just a really, really important key message. And this report will be available from the Inkjet Generation site next week. Also wanted to make everyone aware that we will be hosting a FuturePrint virtual summit the 2nd and 4th of June, because for obvious reasons, all of the events have been cancelled and postponed, or postponed rather. So we'll be running a specific 3-day event with seminars, fireside chats, presentations, completely free, designed to relaunch 2020 and 2021, really to provide a service to the market, to help the market connect and understand what's going on, and how to perhaps re-strategize the future business. And it'll be broken into commercial print, wide format print, and industrial print. And sort of before I conclude, thanks to our FuturePrint partners, and of course Ricoh, for supporting this initiative. We will run this session in a live format at TCM in October at the rescheduled event. But based on what we've just talked, I think actually what's exciting, I'm hearing this is a maturing technology. It's starting to become a technology that isn't really something that R&D's played with and a few people think is exciting, but actually commercially people are kind of, it's stable, it's maturing, it's solid, it's consistent, it's robust, and that's really, really important, I think, for mass market adoption. Clearly, there's a better economic reason for adopting, partly through I guess a process of assimilating what problems need to be solved with this technology. And we've learned, and clearly the community has learned, and you guys have learned, what the best role digital can play. And I guess in tandem, the technology has improved as well as on a technical level. Water-based, I think, is an important development. And from what I'm hearing, designers are really embracing this. And once designers are seeing the value and understanding digital, understanding the key aspects of digital, I think adoption starts to become faster. And lastly, this localized, I really like this localized, decentralized model, because I think not just given the situation with now with COVID, but generally speaking going forward, I think that is going to become something the consumer world will need and expect. So on that note, so thank you so much, everyone. I think it's probably the best attended webinar I've ever run, like nearly 100 people online. That's fantastic. Thank you so much to our panel as well, because we've got, as I said, a really superb list of people. This has been a recorded session, so you can obviously dip back into it and so on. If you have any questions for the panel or want to reach out to the panel, what I'm going to do is send an email to everybody after, and assuming they're okay with it, I'll put their contact details in the email if anybody wants to follow up with the conversation. So unless anybody else has got anything to say from the panel at this moment, no, I'd like to say thank you for being part of this session. We will host another one on the 30th of April, and that one is called The Future of Inkjet. So thanks again, and stay safe, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Marcus.
Cheers, guys.
Marcus.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Marcus. Thank you all for attending. Goodbye. Have a nice evening.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Stay healthy.
Yeah, definitely.